Morning, everybody. We got some stuff coming up. It was announced early, but I want to say it one more time. The movie night and the men's breakfast. Let me make it clear because I don't know if it came across right. If you come to these, you don't have to cook and you get to eat. Okay? Just so everyone understands. That's what's coming up this weekend. Friday night, we've got our movie night, which is always a lot of fun. And Saturday morning, we'll have our men's breakfast, and it is always a lot of eating, which is fun. So try and make a plan to be at those. I'm going to jump in somewhat quickly. We got to recap a little bit because the lesson today, More Lies of the Devil, is another lesson in sort of a web of Joseph's thoughts, which is terrifying to say, but there are these two sort of sister series that we've been running sort of parallel to each other. One is this idea of Jesus's view of reality, that Jesus sees reality in a way that is right. And it might look backwards and feel confusing, but forgiveness makes the world a better place. And sacrifice makes your life and the lives of those around you better. The way to life is through death. This view of reality that Jesus espouses is true. That's one of our series. And then the other that's related is sort of the other side of the coin, which is the lies of the devil. And we talked about one of those, and we talked about love. The way that our culture understands and uses the word love is a corrupted lie that the devil has sold us, not in any small part because of Disney, which I usually love, but for the sake of that lesson was the enemy. The idea that love is a feeling, love is an emotion, love is something you feel and should be easy. Those are all ideas we have about love. The idea that you could fall into and out of love. Love in the Bible, the love that Christians should have, the love that God has for us, is much more akin to what we might call commitment, or in the negative sense, stubbornness for a very good thing, right? Commitment, agape love, is not this emotional feeling, but it's commitment. No matter what, no matter when, in sickness and in health, till death do us part, I will do what is in your best interest. That's love. Not the lie that the devil sold us for so long. And then today, when we talk about more lies of the devil, I don't know exactly what to call this lie, other than the old, I'm better than they are. There's this thing in us as humans where we like to rank or organize things in our mind so that we can get a gauge of where we are, right? And so we'll look around us and we'll see some people are doing X, Y, and Z. Some people are doing A, B, and C, and I'm somewhere here. And you try and situate yourself based on the people around you. And we look at other people and we say, well, I'm better than them. Or we say, they're better than me. That is a lie. That's a lie. That's not reality. So look at Luke chapter 18. Look at Luke chapter 18. Now, we don't typically probably say it in such blunt language that I'm better than that person. But it definitely comes out in the way that we think and conceptualize the world. Luke chapter 18, Jesus tells this parable to people who are standing around listening to him, the crowd listening to him. And he gets done talking about the persistent widow and how a good God is going to hear you. If an evil judge would hear a persistent widow, then a good God will hear his children. And then in verse 9, it says, as he told this parable, Luke chapter 18 and verse 9, as he told this parable to some who trusted in themselves that they were righteous and treated others with contempt. He also told this parable to some who trusted in themselves and treated others with contempt. The parable begins, 2 men went up into the temple to pray, one Pharisee and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee, standing by himself, prayed thus, God, I thank you that I am not like other men, extortioners, unjust, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week. I give tithes of all that I get. But the tax collector, standing off, would not even lift up his eyes to heaven, but he beat his breast, saying, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. Jesus tells them, I tell you, this man went down to the house down to his house justified rather than the other. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, but the one who humbles himself will be exalted. This is a parable that, I mean, if you understand the players, kind of makes sense. In fact, I don't know that anyone said anything wrong in the whole parable. No lies were told throughout the telling of this parable. A Pharisee, like we've talked about a number of times before, they were the most religious people in the entire ancient Near East. They were so dedicated and committed to keeping the law that Jesus accuses them of tithing their spice cabinets. Can you imagine getting ready to give an offering on Sunday morning and checking in the spice cabinet to make sure you've got a tenth of your cumin, a tenth of your parsley? That's what Jesus says. That's how seriously these people took keeping the law. And they did it. Like historically, like there was no level of commitment quite like the Pharisees at this time. Bible committed to memory, life dedicated to teaching the Bible and keeping and living out the Torah. Meanwhile, the tax collector had a well-known reputation for not only being a traitor to the Jews, but also taking a little bit more than they were supposed to when they went and collected their taxes. Shaving a little off the top because what are you going to do? Tell me I'm lying? I've got the power of Rome behind me. So they'd lie and they'd steal, and potentially other moral failings came right along with that. And so as the Pharisee gets up and prays to God, I thank you I'm not like other men who are extortioners. Yeah, he's not an extortioner. Unjust. Well, he keeps the law, so he's not unjust intentionally at least. Adulterers. Well, definitely if he's keeping the law, that's one of the 10 commandments, so he's not doing that. Or even like this tax collector. Well, he's a Pharisee, not a tax collector. He says, I fast twice a week. He probably did. I give tithes of all that I get. Yep, if he's keeping the law. Did the Pharisee lie? At no point did he told the truth. Yeah, he did all of that. And then the tax collector, does he lie? He doesn't lift his eyes and he beats his chest and he says, God be merciful to me, a sinner. All checks out to me, like sinner, Pharisee, they all said true things. And yet there's a difference. And we all kind of feel it when you read what the Pharisee says, don't we? You're not that righteous. Like, no, you're not. You're no better than them. Like, we all have that instinctually. But, well, hold on, though. Kind of, Kind of. He's living a more religiously upright life, a more morally righteous life. And yet Jesus says that the tax collector who was beating his chest and asking for mercy is the one who goes home justified, the one who goes home righteous. Now, this is a strange concept that we're not going to dive too much into today, but 1 Samuel 16 and verse 7, that the Lord doesn't see the way that man sees, as man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. So it's safe to say there's something in the heart of these two men that is the differentiating factor, not their moral record or their goodness and badness that they've done. So I read this parable to show the lie. Now, we don't usually say the lie this obvious, right? We don't say the quiet part out loud, so to speak. But I think this attitude comes out, especially when you think about how we talk about kids, right? Like, especially middle school, high school kids. We categorize them, don't we? What do we call them? Well, you've got your good kids and your bad kids. And obviously, the good kids are the ones that don't drink or smoke or sleep around, and the bad kids are the ones that do. That's it's the most black and white way that we differentiate kids always. I think, I can go out and say it, I think that's a lie. I don't know that that's fair. I don't think that's in view or in step with the reality that Jesus teaches. I think it's a lie of the devil, and it's this same lie that we read about here in Luke chapter 18. Now, let me make it very clear what I'm not saying. I'm not saying that it's good for high school kids to drink and smoke and sleep around. Everyone understand that? No one's going to leave here accidentally misunderstanding? Okay, good. So what I am saying, though, is that there is a tendency to believe that what makes someone good or bad is just the things that we can see. And when we have that in our minds, in how we look at kids, we do the same thing when we look at our peers. And we'll say things like, I would never do such and such like so-and-so. All right? I would never get caught up in that. Or, thank God I'm not like this person. Here's what's funny about this. Look at Matthew 26. Look at Matthew chapter 26, because there was another guy. Some people call him the most relatable person in the whole Bible. There was another guy that had a very similar perception of his world. He had a very similar understanding of good people and bad people, and some people who do bad things are bad people, and some people like me who would never do those bad things are good people. And his name is Peter, all right? Peter, who at the time was probably in his very early 20s, is sitting down with Jesus and the disciples. They've eaten Passover. Jesus has instituted the Lord's Supper. And then in Matthew 26 and verse 30, it says, when they had sung a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. And Jesus said to them, you will all fall away because of me this night. For it is written, I will strike the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will be scattered. But after I'm raised up, I will go before you to Galilee. Now remember, at this point, Jesus hasn't died. The apostles do not understand what's coming. When Jesus says, when I'm raised up, they're like, from sleep? Like, they're very confused by what's about to happen, even though Jesus has said it very plainly. They still just can't get their minds around, what do you mean you're going to die? Okay? And so he says, you're all going to fall away after I am killed. Peter, in verse 33, pipes up and says, even though they all fall away because of you, I will never fall away. Hey, they might, right? But you know what? That's just not my area of temptation, Peter says. I'm not tempted by that. You know what? They might run away from you, but I'm not going to, because that's not in me. That's not in me. That's not the kind of person that I am, Jesus. And Jesus replies, I tell you truly, this very night, before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. So here's what happens next. They're in the garden. Jesus is praying. Judas leads the Jews into the garden, kisses Jesus. They arrest Jesus. Different accounts give a couple of different details, but one of the details is while Jesus is being arrested, Peter backs up what he says, doesn't he? Like, he absolutely tries to live out what he proclaimed so incredibly boldly here. And he hacks off a guy's ear. I mean, so they're arresting Jesus, and Peter's like, this is my moment. Told you I wasn't going to shy away. Yeah! Like, probably going for his head. Most people don't try and cut people's ears off. And this is what I imagine. I imagine Peter went like that, and the guy went like this, and it caught the ear instead of the neck. You see what I'm saying? So, like, that's possibly, who knows? And Jesus just goes, stop it. Picks up the ear, puts it back on, which apparently no one was amazed by. And then Peter's very confused, because the next thing that happens is Jesus just goes with them. He just walks away and lets himself get arrested. And it's like the middle of the night, and Jesus goes, and they take him to a couple different locations, and at each location they conduct what can only be described as a sham trial. Like, they have to go through the court system, their Jewish laws and their Roman laws at the time, and so they go through all that process in the middle of the night. You guys know courts don't function in the middle of the night, right? Okay, so that's what's happening, and Jesus is letting it happen, and maybe Peter is in his mind hearing, they're going to kill me and I'll be raised up. What does that mean? Are they going to actually kill him? Let me say it like this. Peter had a bomb dropped on his world 3 years ago when he met this guy named Jesus, who gave him an entirely new perception of reality, an entirely new view of how the world works, that you're supposed to love your enemies and turn the other cheek and go the extra mile. And he bought it. He said, I believe it. And then he decided to follow this guy for the next 3 years of his life. And if you remember much about disciples and rabbis, following him didn't mean like, I pledge my allegiance, but I'm going to live my life. It meant I'm going to sleep where he sleeps, eat what he eats, walk how he walks, speak how he speaks. I'm going to do everything the way that he does it so I can be just like my rabbi, who I believe is Jesus, who I believe is the Son of God, he said a couple chapters ago in Matthew 16. That bomb that got dropped on Peter's life 3 years ago when he met Jesus is now getting undone. And what do you think Peter is thinking in the middle of the night when his rabbi is getting arrested? And now a whole new bomb gets dropped on him. Was I wrong? Like, he's supposed to overthrow the Romans and restore the kingdom, and he's going to get killed. But was I wrong about this? I couldn't be wrong. I mean, I watched him, the 5,000 thing, and he cast that one demon out that literally no one else could cast out. Could I be? No, he walked on water. I walked on water. Like, what am I thinking? I'm not wrong, but how is this going to work? Why is he letting this happen? I mean, Peter is as disoriented as you could possibly be. Mind you, it's the middle of the night. Anyone think very clearly in the middle of the night? All right. Then they're sitting around a fire because I guess it's cold. And this girl goes, hey, I saw you with him, didn't I? And he says, listen, the most generous interpretation to me of Peter is, I don't know what you're talking about. He's got things racing through his mind, and he waves off the question. A couple minutes later, another person says, hey, I know, I saw you with him, right? You're one of his followers. And he says, I don't even know the guy. Like, again, was he denying that I knew him, or was he just having a lot going on and trying to brush the question off, right? I don't know exactly what it looked like. But the third time is pretty definitive, because the third time, someone actually says to him, look at verse 73, Matthew 26, all the way down in verse 73. After a little while, the bystanders came up and said to Peter, certainly you too are one of them, for your accent betrays you. Now, whether they're talking about the way that he speaks, like the words he uses or his tone, or if it's actually his accent, like he couldn't say his ahs because he was British or something, like depending on what it was, we're not sure. But let me say what they just said in a little bit different language. You sound just like him. Think about 24 hours before this, the kind of compliment that would have been to Peter. Someone said, I sound like my rabbi. Jesus, they said, I sound just like you. I sound just like you. They could tell that I've been with you because I sound like you. How incredible is that? I'm getting it. I must be doing something right. And yet this time, in this context, in the middle of the night, after brushing off the question twice, he responds with, verse 74, then Peter began to invoke curses on himself and to swear, saying, I do not know the man. And immediately the rooster crowed. Like, did Peter know he was denying Jesus? Maybe not. Maybe he was seriously just so caught up and churned up that he didn't realize what he was doing. But then the rooster crowed. And it said that Peter remembered the saying of Jesus, and he went out and wept bitterly. I would never, that's just not my temptation. I would never be like them. They might leave you, I'll never leave you. And Jesus said, no, you just haven't been tested yet. You haven't been through what they've been through yet. Let me tell you a short story. I'll try and keep it short, because talking about Peter took longer than I thought. Imagine, I have this in my notes, I have to say it. Imagine how Peter thought about Judas, right? Like, he probably was like, thank God I'm not like Judas. I would never sell Jesus out like Judas. Well, maybe he didn't kiss him, but I want to tell you a story about a kid. There's a kid I knew in high school who, for category's sake, was a really good kid, okay? Didn't run around, didn't party, didn't smoke. The realm of this kid's temptation was he was not particularly drawn to substance, parties, alcohol. That wasn't really his thing. His thing was more sexual temptation, which for every high schooler ever is in the realm of temptation. But that was the thing. If something was going to get him, it's probably going to be that. It's probably going to be fooling around with a girl or something to that nature. And so this this kid I knew, he had a tendency to stay away from situations. He would try to stay away from situations. But here's the deal, is because I knew him, the only reason, I want to say this gently, but I want to be honest, the only reason that he didn't end up getting pregnant with a girl in high school is because he didn't meet the right girl who pursued him hard enough. That's really what it boils down to. Because I knew him, and there's no way he was strong enough to battle that off. Now, he didn't go seeking it out, which was commendable, for sure, but he just didn't exactly meet the right girl. And if he had, the story would be very, very different. The jig is up. That was me in high school. No doubt about it. No doubt about it. Now, listen, did I try to make good choices? Yeah, for sure. But it's by the grace of God that I didn't run into a girl who was a bit more pursuant than I had run into in the past. Because if I had, I know that kid pretty well, and he would have folded like a piece of paper in the wind, okay? The idea that you're better than somebody else because you don't struggle with the same thing they struggle with is comical. You haven't been through what they've been through. I told you that kid, me, drinking has never been something that particularly tempted me. Just not been something that I've been like, ooh, I got to really battle against that. It tastes and smells gross, and I guess I'm a child enough that alone deters me, okay? You know what? I never lost a child and turned to something to numb that pain. I've never grown up in a house where someone did drink. And to say that because I don't drink, thank you, God, I'm not a sinner like that tax collector, I'm better than someone or doing better than someone or a better Christian than someone is just a level of ignorance, a level of lie-believing ignorance that breaks the world further. That's what the devil wants to do. That's why he sold us this lie that you're better than someone else. Is because when you believe that, and you start setting up these hierarchies and making these judgments, you fracture things. You break relationships. You break trust. And it's not just the idea that you're better than somebody else, but the devil, he does not care about you as much as you think. So the other side of the coin is that maybe you're not as good as somebody else, and you look at someone else and you experience great shame because you see them and you feel like they are so religious and good Christian, they're so much like Jesus, and I'm never going to be like that. And you know what? The devil doesn't care at all if you feel shame or pride. Either one's just fine with him because he doesn't care about you all that much. He just wants you to believe the lie and break the world. That's it. But let us back up a little bit. All of this, the idea that we have some sort of spiritual hierarchy or we're better or worse than other people, is really just a symptom of a much deeper lie, because the truth is you are not any less broken than anybody else or any more broken than anybody else. You are just hiding it better or worse. That's really what it boils down to. Because this lie that I'm better than someone else is just... This lie that I'm better than someone else is truly just downstream of another lie that the devil has told us, which is your righteousness or your standing with God is based on the good and the bad things you do. That's the lie. Because if what you do determines what quality you are or value you have as a person, well, then that makes sense. So this lie that I'm better than someone else because I do or don't do things that they do or don't do is just downstream of the lie that what I do is what determines my righteousness. What I do, if I'm a good person, then I'm good with God. And if I'm a bad person, then I'm not good with God. And that, what my works are, determines my salvation. That's the other lie. It's just upstream a little ways. And the truth of that is, Romans 3:23, for all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. You're not any less broken. You're differently broken. Here's what I mean is some of our brokenness is on the outside, and it's really easy for people to see. And then some of our brokenness is on the inside, like that kid that I knew in high school who lost battles to lust all the time, but nobody knew about it. Some of our brokenness smells. I remember my uncle told a story about a guy who was an alcoholic, and he was coming to church regularly, but you could smell it on him. And he said everyone had a problem with him being at church because you could smell his sin. And he had the thought, or someone made the comment that, thank you, God, that people can't smell my sin. Sure glad people don't smell my dishonesty. Sure glad people don't smell my anger or my lust or my sins. It's not a matter of if this is in you, if you are broken. James chapter 1, in verse 14, James says, each person is tempted when he is lured and enticed by his own desire. And when desire is conceived, it gives birth to sin. And when sin is fully grown, it brings forth death. Do not be deceived, my beloved brothers. Listen, you say it's not in you. It's in you. It's in you. You are no better than somebody else. And you know what? Your righteousness doesn't depend on that. Thank God. If our righteousness depended on how well we could reconstruct our own broken selves, we'd be doomed, frankly, completely and utterly without hope in the world. But this is even still not far enough upstream. This one lies downstream of an even bigger lie because, like I said, we like to pick out which sins are okay to have and which sins are not. Our culture has decided that some are okay and some aren't. For example, if someone gets angry, what do we say? Everybody gets angry, right? Okay, well, but if someone's an alcoholic, what do we say? I don't want them going to church. They smell like alcohol. If someone struggles with lust, yeah, everyone battles that, right? But if someone commits adultery, they have a scarlet letter on them, if you will. Listen, there are some sins that we culturally look at and say, I would never do that. They're a bad person because of that. But the sins inside of us are okay. Or the sins that we don't have to see all the time, those are okay. Everyone struggles with those. And now there's some sentiment there that is acceptable, okay? I'm not giving a full dissertation on how we should view sin. But what I am saying is, upstream a little ways, who told us we get to decide which sins are good and which sins are bad? When did that happen? Who said we get to decide that? Do you want to know the truth? The devil is the one that told us that in Genesis chapter 3. We're not going to read all of this for the sake of time, but back in Genesis chapter 3, you've got Adam, Eve. At the end of creation, God says it's very good. The world is the way he wanted it to be. Creation is good. It can produce after itself. It can grow. It has this incredible potential to be amazing. And God said it's good, and it's very good. And God is with them in the garden. And he gives them one rule. It's not even really a rule. It's more like really, really, really good advice. That tree is poisonous. Helpful information to know. Don't eat of the tree. And what's the tree called? Do you remember? We call it a really funny word in little kids' classes. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And it almost becomes one word. It's like a sound. It's not even words. But the idea is that the tree gives the person who eats of it the knowledge of good and evil. You understand? That's why we call it the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. The temptation for Eve in the garden, when the devil looks at her, he says that God knows once you eat of it, in Genesis chapter 3, God knows once you eat of it, you will be like him, knowing good from evil. Now, here is, in a roundabout way, what he is tempting her with. You get to define it for yourself. Right? Like you'll know it, and then you'll be able to decide this thing over here is good, and this thing over here is evil, because you'll have that knowledge. So you get to make the rules. You get to decide which sins are okay and which sins are not okay, which things are destructive and which things aren't destructive, what you can do and what you cannot. If you want to decide that for yourself, Eve, eat the fruit. You'll be like God. You'll get to decide what is good and what is evil in your own eyes. And that is enticing. Eve says that the tree was desired to make one wise, that she was like, that sounds like a really good deal. As a matter of fact, let me just say it this way. That sounds like something you would need to live to be able to know what is good and what is evil, right? You would need that to survive in the world. So honestly, it's sort of negligence if she doesn't partake of the tree, right? She's just choosing ignorance. No, see, the devil created a false dichotomy here. It wasn't ignorance or wisdom, it was trusting God or wisdom. Because God had already set parameters for them. He already told them the things that were going to help them and the things that were going to hurt them. And so Eve's act of eating of this fruit had so much more to do with rebellion against God's rules than it did a desire for good. This is in essence what she said. I don't want God to tell me what's good and bad. I want to decide it for myself, which is pretty much every teenager in the history of the world. Do you see the parallel here? It's rebellion against your parents. It's fighting against the people who know what's best for you. And in this case, it's the original lie that God wanted us to, that the devil wanted us to believe. If you get to decide what's good and evil, then you get to decide what sins are okay and what sins aren't okay. And if you get to decide what sins are okay and what sins aren't okay, then you get to judge or make a judgment on which people are good people and which people are bad people. And if you get to do that, guess whose seat you're sitting in? God's. And he's coming back in a minute. And he called seat check because he's the only one who gets to sit in that seat. This is how the world got broken. Because humans believed a lie that the devil sold us at the very beginning. And it's caused us to have all kinds of fractures and brokenness and other lies that we've spun up because we believed the root lie that we get to decide what is good and what is evil. It's the same lie from the garden. This lie has been so deeply rooted into our minds that it affects the way that we live our lives. It affects the way that we think about things. It affects the way that we judge people. It affects the way that we act in our day-to-day life. It affects our relationships, right? I don't have to go into all the details here, but listen, what if you and your friend define good and evil differently? Now what? Now you have wars. That's how wars happen, okay? This thought, this belief in a lie, wreaked so much havoc on the world that by Genesis chapter 6, it says that the world was full of evil only. That the thoughts and intents of man's heart were only evil continually. Violence filled the whole world, and God said, it is the most merciful thing that I can do to put a stop to it. And he saved Noah, and he flooded the rest of the earth. And then you read the story, and you notice, man, that Abraham guy who was supposed to partner with God to save the world, he liked to define what was good and bad for himself quite frequently. Like he said, it's good for me to lie about Sarah so that she doesn't get taken, even though God just promised me that he was going to protect me. Like he said, it's good for me to have a child with Hagar, even though God promised he was going to give me a child. Instead of trusting him, I'm going to do it myself. Then you see later on that Moses comes into the story. Not Moses Michael, but Moses from the Bible. And he does the same thing. How's he gonna rescue Egypt, his people in Egypt? He sees an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, and so what does he do? Trust God, cry out to God, murder the Egyptian. That'll work. Moses takes matters into his own hands and ends up being a fugitive on the run. You keep reading the story and you keep seeing failure after failure after failure. People constantly choosing the same choice, believing the same lie that they get to decide good and evil for themselves. Then you get to the Judges. And guess what phrase is used in the Judges? The thoughts of man's heart were only evil always. It's the exact phrase from Genesis chapter 6. What's the author trying to tell us with that? Nothing has gotten better. The world is still just as broken as it was. People are still believing the lie that the devil told them all the way back in chapter 3. So what has to happen? Well, we're fast forwarding a lot because 33 minutes in. But then we get to Jesus. And Jesus shows up, and he doesn't just show up and teach a more correct moral compass, right? Jesus is not some great moral teacher. He's not showing up to just give us the right answers. So that was our problem all along. We just needed the right answers. We just didn't have the right answers. No, he shows up and he sheds light in the darkness. He shows up to bring the truth of reality back into the present because everyone here has been living out the lie that they can be their own God. And so Jesus shows up and he brings the truth and he shines the truth on the darkness and he shows you the reality that is here, the truth of reality. And he says that, listen, you should forgive other people because forgiveness undoes the brokenness that's inside of us. He says things like you should sacrifice for other people because when you sacrifice of yourself, it gives more life to you and those around you. He says things like the way to life is through death, and that the value that you have is exponential. and that the creator of the entire universe wants you to be close to him so badly because he loves you and he thinks you're great. Think about Peter telling Jesus, Jesus, I'm so glad I'm not like Judas. What do you think Jesus would say? Why, Peter? I love Judas. Jesus loved Judas. This isn't about moral standing, right and wrong. This is about a relationship with a God that wants a relationship with you. Not about your moral standing or your ability to do right or wrong things. God wanted you so badly because he loves you. He wanted you so badly that he was willing to get his hands dirty, come where you are, and forge a path through suffering and death back to where he is so that you could get there too. And while he's here, he told you the truth of reality that helps heal the world. This is the undoing of a lie. The undoing of a lie that the devil told us a long, long, long time ago. Humble yourself, submit to Christ, and follow him into life. And if you need to do that this morning, we can show you what the rest of the story is, or if you need prayers of the church, you can let us know that as well. Just come forward, and we love you, and we'd love to help you while we stand and while we sing.